Hello, welcome to ScriptWave. In our previous lectures, we discussed about loops and control flow statements. In today's lecture, we'll be starting our journey with functions. Without any further ado, let's see a quick agenda for this lecture. First, we'll see a quick introduction for Python functions. Then we'll see what is defining a function. Then we'll understand how we can call a function using the function name. Then we'll see what is return statement in Python functions. And finally, we'll be executing code for all the above discussed topics. Let's start with the functions introduction. Python functions are reusable code blocks used to perform a specific task. So what are functions? Functions are the reusable code blocks used to perform any specific task. They help organize programs into smaller sections and execute the same logic whenever needed by calling a function. So I give an example which happened in my life. I went for an interview. So my manager asked the interviewee to write a function, or she just said write code for finding if a given number is even or odd. So we have two people, candidate A and candidate B. Candidate A has around 80 percentage and candidate B is 70 percentage. So we have a soft corner on candidate A because of his percentage. But whenever he started writing the code, candidate A, he just went ahead with writing if statements and he just executed the code. Of course, he wrote in JavaScript, but the context is same. So I just trying to discuss. Whereas the person with 70%, the person B, wrote using the functions. So then we selected person B in spite of he having lesser percentage. The reasons being, so I asked about the reasons why we rejected A but selected B. My manager explained me that he proved me that he will be writing modular coding. He is not a person who just try to solve the problem. Instead, he is writing the code in a modular structure. So this is very important concept, and even interviewers will check about your capability on using the functions. So if you have time, whenever you're in an interview, try to write using function. My basic approach would be use functions for any program. So you learn the functions right now. So once you start learning it, just go ahead and start writing functions for every program. Even hello world, just say function and hello world. That's very good approach which help us in getting to better places. Let's see why we use functions. We use functions for code readability. As we said, we use functions for modular coding. So it helps us in reading the code in a modular structure. Modularity. So we have modules by modules. So we can understand what is each section is doing and what is the output of that section. Readability. If you have proper blocks, we can easily read and understand what is happening. Maintainability. This is very important point which we are about to discuss. So if we have the code modularly, it is easy to maintain. If you have any issue, we can just go to that particular code and edit or make any changes for only that code. We can leave the rest as it is. This helps us in maintaining larger codes. Like we can expect like some millions of lines of code which might need to be debugged. So to debug that huge code, we need modularity. That is the reason we move ahead with one more concept called as classes. This is also in a similar journey as functions, but it is much more modular and structured. We can call more structured. This is modular, whereas classes is more structured. We'll be discussing it in upcoming lectures. So let's move forward. Defining a function. A function can be defined using def keyword. So different languages have different ways of defining function. In JavaScript, we use function keyword. In Python, we use def, whereas def stands for define. And we can see the syntax here. First, def, which is a keyword. So we define def and you should have a space. It should be only space. Then you have the function name. So print is a function. Input is a function. Int of is a function. So these are called as built-in functions. Whereas the function which we are defining, let's say function name. So this is a function which has the function name as function underscore name. So this is user defined function. And then we have the parameters. So we can call this as parameters or arguments. And then we have block of code which need to be executed whenever we call this function. And finally, we have the return expression. We'll be discussing each and everything in detail one by one, but this is the basic syntax of the functions in Python. Let's move forward. I have used the word calling. So what is calling? So calling a function is just as simple as calling someone. If you have a person here, let's take his name is Ravi. If you want to talk to him and you are somewhere here, you say, hey Ravi. So this is calling. Similarly, we call the functions using the function name followed by the parenthesis. Here we have the print statement. So we have two entities. We'll be discussing about the return statement as well. But before that, print will allow us in displaying the information. So here if you say fun bracket open close, which is a fun function, this will return us on the screen, welcome to ScriptWave. Let's move forward and understand the return statement as well. Then we'll get into code and understand the differences as well. So I'm moving forward. So the return statement. So what is a return statement? A return statement is used to send a value back from a function. So let's take, we have pop. So we have a list. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. If you remember, we can say print lst of pop. And if we do this, it will pop the last element and returns, and that means it is giving the output 4. That is the value of the popped item. Here it is doing an operation, along with that it's giving something. So in a similar context, we have something called as a return, we call it as return statement, which gives us something after doing an operation. Let's take the example here, def add a comma b. So we are adding two numbers and now we are returning a plus b. Now you can ask me, can I directly write print a plus b? You can definitely do it. But if you print a plus b, you cannot reuse the output that you got from a plus b. Now you want to make an average. So what is average? Sum of events by number of events by n. So here you got the sum already. Now you need to divide by this n. So to do that, you can just say add of 10 comma 20 divided by 2. Here you are getting the value from this function by making the operation as add. So this is the return. It gives the result to place. It gives the result to place where the function was called. So wherever the function is called, it will give the value. So it can be a variable, it can be directly into print statement, you can reuse it, or inside an other function, that is function inside a function. Anywhere it will just return the output. A function can return one or more values. So it can return either one or more values. You can return a list, you can return a dictionary. So anything is allowed in return statements. Let's move forward. So the function arguments. Arguments are the values passed to a function when it is called. So we can call it as arguments. They allow functions to receive input data and perform operations using those values. So we have this function even odd, and we are taking the input. This is called as parameter and this is called as argument. Why parameter? Here we are just taking a variable, and this is not exactly a variable. We cannot call it as a variable because this is just a template. So function is just a template. However, this is the value. It's also called as argument. This value can be a direct value like 16, or maybe let's take we have a is equal to 18. You can just add a as well. So you can reference to a variable as well. If not, you want to reference direct value. Here we have x as a parameter. You can add any number of parameters you want. We'll be discussing about all those scenarios in the upcoming lectures. Here we have x, and we are trying to find even or odd if the given number is even or odd. So here, if the given number is even, then we are returning even. Remember the point, return. And if not, it's an odd number. So here this, why we are printing? We are returning the values, not printing inside the function. So we need to display it. So we are adding a print statement. So this will return even and this will return odd. So once you learn about return statement, maybe I would never recommend you to use print inside a function. If and only if it's explicitly required, add a print statement, else always return. So the best approach or best way of coding, use return, use functions for every code, and you will be the better programmer. So in the next lecture, we'll be discussing about the code. So it's already lengthy, so I just don't want to make it more lengthier. So I'm just moving the code section to next class. Thank you so much. Have a great day. See you in the next lecture.